Before we get started, we'd like to thank our sponsors for making this event possible. Special thanks to our platinum sponsor, OLAS. OLAS enables everyone to own a share of AI, specifically autonomous agent economies. We're also excited to highlight our silver sponsors: NIA, empowering decentralized applications and blockchain ecosystems; Venice AI, a private and uncensored alternative to popular AI apps; Mira, unified AI infrastructure, secured by crypto; and Theric, the first on-chain multi-agent system. To learn more about all of our sponsors, check the description below and dive in. Enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, welcome to the DeFi podcast. We're continuing with our Crypto AI Month series, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, David Minarsch, co-founder of Valory AG, the entity behind OLAS, and one of the leading protocols powering networks of autonomous agents on chain. David, very excited to have you join the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Is it your first time, I assume?
On the DeFi podcast, yeah.
All right, awesome, first timer. So I'm gonna dive right in and hit you with some hard questions out of the gate. But I think there's been a lot of talk about the shape of intelligence in terms of AI, and so I was curious to pick your brain. Do you think we are heading for a world of 1 million models versus a handful of large hyperscale God models, or a million fine tunes of those same 5 models? Those are kind of the 3 scenarios that I've seen, people advocating for. Curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I can see arguments for all of them, right? But I'm tempted to say the first category, so 1 million models. I do think they'll have like a shared root to some degree, but I don't think it will be maybe as prevalent as it is right now. Reason being that I think right now these models aren't really active like learners. They, snapshots of like certain points in time when the training data was assembled and these models were trained. I think we're moving to more like, continuous learners and more agentic kind of setups. And so I think that will cause them to diverge as well, because ultimately, they'll take on more of their like local context and whatever they're deployed. And so I would be in the first camp.
Got it. Well, I think us at Delphi are also betting on that vision quite heavily. So hope you are correct. So next, maybe we just touch on kind of, your background a little bit and why you and your team are the right people to, kind of attack the problem that you're going after at OLAS.
Yeah, so maybe I'll first start with the team and then sort of take it from there. So at Valory, we have 3 co-founders. There's my co-founder David, who is a CTO at Valory, and he has a background in cryptography. Published cryptographer, and a lot of insights in sort of privacy tech, privacy preserving machine learning. These kind of topics are also something he has some experience in. My other co-founder, Oak, that's a pseudonym. He has a strong product background, initially in sort of Web 2, then came into the crypto space around 10 years ago, and he's leading all our product efforts. And on my side, I originally did a PhD in economics, game theory in particular, and then went more in sort of data science, AI, in fintech, and then ultimately joined the sort of crypto AI intersection actually 5 years ago, when most people didn't much think about it, and have been building autonomous agents since. So this idea of like agents has been with me for quite some time. And I think, this kind of combination of talent, we're, quite unique in that sense. What does Valerie do? We're ultimately a core contributor to OLAS. And, with OLAS, what we ultimately aim to achieve is that we want to give people general purpose autonomous AI agents that do valuable things for them as they define. So The problem is today, no one actually has such technology. Obviously, everyone would like very general purpose autonomous AI agents. What we have today are like specialized autonomous AI agents that can do things in like more narrow domains. And so a lot of our thinking goes into, okay, how can we get there? And then importantly, how can we do that in a way where users can own these systems outright, where they can have full, transparency over those systems and can even like potentially run them on their own devices, but certainly don't have to rent them from like a centralized labs or closed AI labs, and sort of pay continuous tax to them. So long story short, we want to create these general purpose autonomous AI agents, and with OLAS, we have a sort of route where we bootstrap our way towards that goal.
Awesome. And then the next thing I want to dive into is just multi-agent systems in general. And so maybe for our audience and for myself, kind of just give us the explain it like I'm five, about this particular area of research and why, we've seen, recent advances that have enabled, what you're building at OLAS. Just curious, kind of what that path has been like, because it does seem like, I'm hearing more and more people talk about this specific domain, which you seem well equipped to address.
Yeah, so I think the first thing we should clarify is like agents versus models. So one way to kind of break that down on a explain it like in five model is like a model is like a talker and an agent is a doer. So in the sense that when we're faced with models, right, we can prompt them and then they'll respond. And then we can put those models into more complex architectures where we would then define the whole thing as an agent, because now it starts having access to a set of tools to do things outside the context of the model itself. So for instance, it can query like the web, or it can even write somewhere on the web. It can maybe use a blockchain by a wallet, these sort of things. So model is the talker, agent is the doer. And then the second part is like, why would you have multiple agents, right? So when we kind of look into the future, I think what we're seeing is that AI as a whole is becoming like everyone's focused on building more and more agentic applications. And that makes a lot of sense, because if you think about like what are the sort of valuable things you could be doing with AI, well, having like some sort of autonomous AI system that does like useful things for you as its owner, well, that is probably one of the most valuable things, because you remove, yourself of the equation, and you can have some sort of system do valuable things for you, right? But the question then is, will these kind of systems, these autonomous agents, be sort of monolithic, or will they take another shape? And I think there's quite a number of indications that they more likely to be multi-agent systems, certainly in the short term, and probably also in the long term. So in the short term, it's very clear why, especially when you build open systems like this, why it makes sense to build them as multi-agent systems rather than as like a monolithic system. So an example is, we have this meme coin which came to the forefront of everyone's attention with Goat and Truth Terminal. And basically, there is a person somewhere running effectively one model and giving it access to the Cloud API, and then giving this combination of models and the infrastructure they've built around it also access to tools like being able to read and write from Twitter, owning a wallet, and so on. Now, that setup already is quite beefy, right? So if you think about it, that person has to, host that local model. They're actually even fine-tuning it, which is like something quite advanced. I mean, your end consumer wouldn't necessarily do that at all. And they then have to host that model somewhere. They then have to get these API keys from Cloud. They get the API keys from Twitter, and then they have to kind of compose that all and update it and run it. That is not something like an end user will sort of use in that sense, right? If you wanted to like make that accessible to an end user, you have sort of roughly two paths. Like one is you create a Web 2 style solution, like you create a SaaS platform, you give them a Gmail login, they sign up, and then they somehow get access to like a copy of the system, right? And then we're sort of back in this world where, yes, the user can have access to such an autonomous AI system, but maybe they have zero control over it and in fact don't even know whether the thing they're interacting with is actually the thing which is being advertised to them. On the other end of the spectrum, we can build this in a very decentralized way, where the user has much more control over the system. So for instance, we could use a decentralized inference network or some other kind of verified inference technology like TEs to basically outsource the running of the model and the accessing of the underlying API. We can maybe use crypto payments to access those models rather than having to provision an API key via some centralized platform. Similarly, we can do that with the Twitter API, which we can proxy in some form. And so what the end user can ultimately run is a much smaller agent that has access to other agents that collectively compose into this kind of truth terminal application in this case. So what we've done in the process is we've decentralized the system, made it more transparent, and we made it actually possible for the user to run the part they care about in it in a local way. And I think that's one example why multi-agent systems is already relevant. Like all the OLAS use cases, when we go through them, have a similar nature. They have sort of two ways that push them towards that form of multi-agent system. One is the end user requirement around having something they're actually willing to run by themselves. And the other, the sort of element of specialization, which comes in at the agent level.
Got it. And do you think that the architecture of the web today kind of needs to shift in order to enable the fullest version of this? You know, I guess one example is that you mentioned in the white paper is around data silos and crypto, you know, potentially being a tool to unlock, you know, data in, you know, a wide variety of places. But the one I'm thinking of is specifically the enterprise. But I've heard of solutions like data DAOs and web proofs kind of trying to attack this problem. But, you know, I haven't really seen that much traction to date. So do you think that, you know, with the arrival of multi-agent systems, you know, there will just be more and more reason for some of these data pools to basically come out in the open? Or how should I think about, you know, the evolution of the web with the arrival of agents?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of topics here, right? Like generally around like the web and then more specifically about data. I'll start to go through them in sequence. So I think one trend I see three big trends with the team. Like we've written a blog about this as well on our site. One is on the web, right? We all on this podcast, I'm sure aware of it, which is sort of read, write, own, like Web 1, Web 2, Web 3 in a sense. And like that's sort of three phases of the web. Although there's now a kind of parallel fourth phase, which is also that the web sort of is going in away in a sense, like things are getting closed off again because of the arrival of AI and like people caring about like kind of ring fencing their data modes and so on. But that's important to see. Like we had initially in the web this opportunity, everyone hosts a server, put up their site so people can read. Then this write element came with the social media applications, and then ownership came with like Web3, where you can like sort of own your assets, own your data, and so on as a concept and a reality. Then if you want to have three phases in AI, they're not exactly like aligned with those web phases, but there's also in a way three phases. You have like rules-based time, when basically people were building AI systems that were purely rules-based, and they could even create some sort of chatbots, although not obviously as powerful as today. Then we had the arrival of learning-based systems, where effectively, rather than writing the hard-coded rules for the ultimate application, you write like a set of rules to have a machine learning system learn the actual rules for the application, right? Like large language model on example. And then now everyone's like kind of pushing towards the third phase, which is agentic, because that's clearly like another leveling up. And so I think the third interesting trend there, which goes alongside that, is around UX. So if you think about UX, viewing has this sort of phase when we have read, right? I view it. Then the mobile and sort of write time came in the web, where we have the mobile and social apps. That's a very interactive phase. And a lot of people today are still very conditioned that an application has to be an interactive application. Like if you ask your, like median developer to say, okay, build an app, they'll start building something with a UI where you click around, right? But actually now with agents, we come more in particularly autonomous agents, we come into a third wave again, where it's a sort of fully autonomous experiences where the agent does something for long periods of time and then delivers you full outcomes. So an example is like a self-driving car, where I no longer interact with the steering wheel and with the gas pedal, I just get in and out, right? And then like similar autonomous AI agents that trade on my behalf, or the truth terminal that posts independently. So that's, I think, one very interesting set of observation is that we have this sort of ownership enablement. Now with the Web3, we have these agentic capabilities coming and these kind of new products around outcomes. And so I think we do have this kind of shift in generally like the application space, which people will build and care about. Now, coming to the web structure itself, I think actually interestingly, if we do end up having more and more multi-agent systems proliferate in an open way, then we start having again a kind of form of the web like in the early days, right? There'll be many agents representing businesses and individuals, and they can then sort of interface with each other. And for that vision, like Web3 is particularly important because it's very hard to imagine that if you have like every user on this planet have, let's say, 10 to 100 agents, some in health, some in wealth, some in like social, whatever, that they will all like interface via the Stripe hub or the AWS hub, or, like this doesn't seem to make much sense. So instead, what I think would happen is that they'll interface via one of the 100 or so open, blockchain ecosystems, because they're like a natural point of composition for like these kind of interactions. So I think that is a real possibility, but we do have to be aware that there's this problem around data. So I want to come to this last point, which you also raised, which is that it affects everyone. So if you think about like how do you build like better AI today, right? Like it's like to a large degree compute and data. And increasingly, it's actually just compute because some of the data you can synthetically generate. But you still like benefit from having sort of unique data because ultimately what these models learn is also some sort of generalized distribution of like world states, right? And so what the closed AI labs do very well is that they kind of have all the open, publicly available data. Plus, on top of that, they have a ton of sort of proprietary data, which in some cases they purchased. In some cases, maybe they didn't purchase. Interesting lawsuits there on the way, right? And then finally, also their synthetic data. And so the question when we're thinking of building sort of these decentralized alternatives, be it like decentralized model training, be it like agent economies like an OLAS, it's always like, how do we create a flywheel so that the valuable data we create in this ecosystem doesn't immediately end up also in the training set for OpenAI or some of the other labs. And I think that's one of the challenges. And I think actually I agree with you implicitly that there's been a lot of talk around data in Web3 and sort of data DAOs and so on. Nothing has like really taken off. I think we're now in a maybe second wave of this technology where I see some interesting early experiments. And what I hope is that we can find architectures where we are permissioning some of this data access, but at the level of DAOs, let's say, right? Where, for instance, OLAS DAO and like a bunch of other DAOs who generate valuable data through their agents can feed that and, let's say, like abstractly define some sort of data lake that is permissioned, which then can be passed to like training runs of new model architectures, which are open and which as a result have an edge because they have like unique inputs. So that's a long answer to your question, but I think it covers some key parts of it.
No, that's a great answer. Very, very thoughtful. I hadn't considered several of those components, especially around like the data generated in multi-agent systems then being used to train novel intelligences. That's super interesting. All right, shifting gears a little bit, I am curious to get your take in terms of what, agent frameworks and an agentic economy might mean for underlying blockchains themselves and kind of a potential shift in market structure, right? And so I know you guys have your agents do a decent amount of activity and then ultimately settle to, some of the leading layer ones. But do you think, just thinking about the bag holders in the audience, like what does this mean for layer ones in general? Are they ultimately just going to be used for settlement? Kind of how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, great question. I think firstly, like agents are great for chains. There will be winners and losers, obviously, but generally speaking, like I think we'll have a billion autonomous AI agents using chains before there will be a billion humans using chains. That's my assumption. And agents, I think, like we covered earlier, like what have been what have been unlocks for agents. I didn't fully answer that, so I'll quickly answer that and come back to the question at hand. Like one big unlock was actually, in my opinion, smart contract chains. So when I was building 5 years ago at Fetch to begin with, we were like, that's enough. Then we started building and realized we don't have enough intelligence. And large language models was the second unlock. So you kind of have this like intelligence unlock and the permissionless settlement and contracting unlock. I think it's not just like sending assets from A to B, like from one wallet to another, and kind of settling that, but it's also about being able to express complex like contracts on chain the same we humans do. And they can be, DeFi contracts, but they can also be other forms of coordination around like committing ourselves to certain goals, and OLAS does that. We can dive into it. So with that in mind, I think generally chains have a similar challenge with respect to agents as they have with humans. They have to find differentiators, which sort of makes it such that agents will operate on those chains. And like today, right, like for the foreseeable, even something like Truth Terminal is not like, fully autonomously choosing these things. There's some human somewhere, even if it's just like enabling like access to that chain or, feeding like some sort of preferences into some prompts or somewhere. So like chains need to be mindful of like speaking to teams and builders who are like building these kind of use cases and understand like sort of what attracts them. Now, from our perspective, with OLAS, we found that generally chains are very excited about us arriving because it brings traction. Like our agents basically feed into some of their core KPIs, like transaction numbers, like gas consumption, and so on. And what we also find is that different chains obviously have different like foci in terms of their like user base, and often the autonomous agent products you bring, because they're still specialized, tend to be specialized for these audiences. So to give you some examples, on Gnosis, we have started with OLAS Predict, and there's like a clear relationship there to Gnosis's interest in prediction markets and like being one of the first who did that. On Optimism and Superchain more generally, we're currently working on like a DeFi use case, which also just yesterday Mode was added to that group of chains. With Zello, it's also DeFi related, but on a different set of protocols. So I think like from my vantage point, a lot of the chains are starting to understand the power of autonomous agents. and what they can do for the users who own or control them ultimately, or enable them through giving them funds.
All right, we're at the halfway point, so I'm going to hit you with a round of rapid fire overrated versus underrated. Are you game?
Let's do it.
All right, yeah, and if any of them you're uncomfortable, feel free to pass. We won't hold it against you. But first one, Google's current market cap, $2 trillion, overrated versus underrated.
Underrated.
Underrated. All right. Well, I'm currently have it in my PA, so I like that answer. All right. Number 2, BitTensor.
Also underrated.
Underrated. Okay. Underrated. Number 3, the scaling laws. Seems like OpenAI is going to drop a new model this December. What do you think about the scaling laws?
Somewhat overrated. Not wrong, but somewhat overrated.
Okay. So you're not completely scale-pilled like Leopold Aschenbrenner and the San Francisco crew.
No, I think there's some limits there, yeah.
Got it. All right. Number 4, automating AI researchers themselves. Thought you might have a interesting perspective here.
Well, underrated in the sense that it's not happening enough there. I think it's a real possibility and underexplored.
Got it. Underrated. Wow. Okay. And then lastly, my 7-month-old son, will he ever have a job in the traditional sense?
Yes, I think what a job is will shift as it always has, but I don't think it will go away.
What do you think will be the leading job candidates outside of like healthcare workers and nurses in 20 years' time, and social media influencers?
I think like anything with a human component where there's a demand side which wants that human element, like
Premium services and restaurants and things
like purely driven by like sort of efficiency and like these kind of concerns, right? There's like preferences people express around like picking one thing over the other. And I think like, it could be like you say, like certain restaurant experience, but also like, I mean, a massage, for instance, like there's something hugely like human about having a human do that. I mean, it would be not comparable to have like a machine do it, right? Like they exist since decades and no one cares. These massage chairs at an airport. And so that's just a dumb example, but I think there's a lot of like experiences which are uniquely human, which will find more attention. I mean, what's key is that people have purchasing power, and if they have purchasing power, new kind of services will be created because people will have shifts in demand, and then there's a market.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I actually love the Tolstoy line of thought in What is Art, where he basically kind of makes the point that over the last 200 years, we became experts at transferring human knowledge, but over the next 200 years, we'll become experts at the transfer of unique human feelings and emotions, which I thought was like kind of a beautiful way to articulate it. But that was good. Thanks for playing overrated versus underrated. We're going to move on. So I do want to touch on OLAS versus the competition. It does seem like, the agents and agent interoperability is super hot right now, and there's a decent number of projects doing it. So I do want to understand kind of some of the unique design choices that you guys have made and some of the differentiators of OLAS versus your competitors.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one dimension is around like autonomous products versus user prompted products. So AI agents is a bit of a broad term, and like sometimes it gets used for AI workflows where a human prompts something and a few seconds or milliseconds later you have like some sort of maybe like suggested transaction for your wallet, or like some sort of refined prompt with online data or whatever. These are very useful kind of tools, and they're like fundamentally different from like an autonomous AI agent where you sort of maybe fund the system and give it like a high level goal, and then it goes away and executes this over long periods of time. So OLAS sits in this sort of autonomous space. And then also the other differentiating axis, which is very important, is sort of closed versus user-owned. So I think what we're seeing even in crypto now is that there's a lot of interesting experiments which are actually extremely centralized. So there's a tradable token, but everything else is on a proprietary platform. You can't download the model, you can't download the agent. You literally can just go to a website where you can see maybe some traces, and then you can buy the token. And I think that's like, fine. Like it's one approach to take, but it's fun, like qualitatively very different to what we have at OLAS, where everything you can see on the OLAS site in terms of statistics, in terms of like the products, you can download this open source code, you can run it yourself, you can participate in these agent economies. So that's one way I think about it. The other, that was sort of under experience and user experience level separation. The other way to think about it is at the tokenomics. So like I've seen very few actually interesting, like I think, experiments around tokenomics with agents at all. And there's maybe 2 or 3. One of them is OLAS, I would say. We have like a very unique staking mechanism, which is called proof of active agent, which coordinates agent activity. The way to think about it is the staking mechanism sets KPIs, which the agent then have to fulfill. And that sort of is like leveraging one of these key aspects of crypto platforms, which are around coordination, like smart contracts can coordinate these off-chain entities, be it humans or software agents, in magical ways in a sense, and we're kind of exploiting that there. More generally, I think OLAS has really this long-term vision to bring about better and better autonomous AI agent systems, whereas I would say some of the other products I'm seeing are maybe a bit more opportunistic. Not all of them, but like certainly some of them are sort of maybe looking around what's like a hype now, like, okay, memes, okay, I'm going to build some sort of meme thing, and then I don't know how long that will last. Now, having said that, we're actually also having some community members launch these kind of applications on OLAS, so they're possible. But I do think it's important to, in crypto and AI, really have this sort of long-term view, because I think one thing which crypto and AI separates from crypto, and that gets a lot of people who come from crypto into crypto and AI confused, is that what tends to happen in crypto is you have these short cycles. You have like a well-defined protocol, you deploy it, the tokenomics around it either work or they don't, the primitives either like are spot on or they don't, and then it's sort of about like capturing that market and placing it there. In crypto and AI, by definition, like your product, when you're launching it, is already outdated, right? Like the AI space moves so fast that it's all about, do you have a flywheel around iteration from where you're now to the next step, to the next step, to the next step, and does that flywheel make sense? And I think we at OLAS are also very focused on that. So yeah, you asked me earlier, overrated, underrated with respect to BitTensor. Like the reason why I said underrated is still because I think what they have achieved in terms of like community engagement and growth around like with the idea is fantastic. I'm not such a big fan of the tokenomics at all, but like I think they're doing very well on that tangent.
Got it. And I think that is a good segue to like the flywheels that you guys are trying to build. Like, do you think this category is kind of a winner take most or a winner take all category, just given the flywheel effect around, onboarding developers, more code, potentially more services, and then, hopefully more money pouring into the ecosystem? Or do you think it ends up being more fragmented? And if so, how do you think about, building those flywheels at OLAS?
Yeah, I mean, I think agents is such a massive market that I would be very surprised if there's a winner takes all. And because the outcome, like, let's think about like where ultimately agents should be seen. I mean, they should be a significant part of the service economy globally, like autonomous AI agent. Like there's a entire like segment of services which you can just outright replace with autonomous AI agents. there's new kinds of services they can offer. So if you're thinking about like global economy and like ultimately that being sort of one day the TAM for this entire space across closed and open and decentralized and centralized deployment modes, then it's enormous. And the question is, if let's say we end up in a world where it's a winner takes all, like we have an open AI agent, and everyone, like literally every business, every human will have their 10 or 20 or 50 copies running on that sort of mega cluster. It sounds extremely unlikely that will happen, right? Like that there would be no like relation to the kind of economy we have today. Like it would be, everything would change. And so I think
No, so sorry, just to, I guess I did want to make sure I got my question. So maybe I don't understand like agent interoperability that well, but is there a reason like one protocol would be used because of the compounding nature of like individual bytes of code? Or, does your same answer still apply?
I'll do that. But like, if you think about like the intelligence part of the equation, right? And like we subscribe to this idea that there will be the sort of best agent, and then we sort of all rent that from somewhere. Similarly, I find that hard to believe even in an open source setting where, it's very easy to make this analogy to something like Linux, that there will be the sort of Linux of whatever the kind of steady state autonomous AI agent architecture will be at some point. I find that hard to believe as well, because autonomous AI agents are, as I say, when they're really good, they need to be acting in response to their local context. They need to be tuned to their local context. They need to be actively learning from it, which immediately introduces divergence at, the quote unquote weights level, if you think about it in a sort of model sense, but also in terms of like their kind of deployment and how they're interacting with like businesses and users. So let's come back to the core of your question. I think we have this like so fast expanding space. We have in AI space like maps of agent frameworks which are never ending. Like there's 10,000 agent frameworks or something, and then probably like 20 of them are sort of something people would have heard of, and lots of others which are sort of cool. So I find it hard to believe that like on the stack level, there'll be like that sort of winner. Again, also coming back to the reasons of like local context mattering. The second thing is at the coordination level. Well, I do think protocols like OLAS have like way room to grow, because you effectively coordinate different like use cases, which you could think of some sort of form of vertical integration. And then like by doing so, because they're multi-agent system, you enable them to be composed with other use cases. But I think of it more like DeFi Legos, in the sense where some of these composition will be even maybe with competing agent protocols or with other sort of agent use cases where the value capture isn't entirely by any given agent protocol. So I struggle to see that in any sort of meaningful short-term to medium-term timeframe we'll have any form of consolidation around like a single thing. But that doesn't mean that those protocols who do it well don't have massive room to grow. So that's my take, maybe somewhat unsatisfactory, but yeah, that's how I would put it.
No, that makes sense. So I appreciate you clarifying that for me. And then next, I do want to make sure we touch on use cases that you guys are excited about, both, in the near term. Reading the white paper, it seemed like targeting, a decent number of Web3 related use cases, but also, in the long term, obviously, it seems like there is potential just much more broadly. So just curious to get your takes around kind of the initial use case that you guys are targeting, as well as, medium to long term, where you'd be excited about seeing adoption.
Yeah. So right now, as we discussed earlier, like there's the protocol, which is a permissionless protocol. Anyone can launch a use case on it and use the existing deployed agents and plug into them to leverage them in their multi-agent systems. That's happening. There's all sorts of builders who are building there without Valerie's involvement. Like the example is Peak Network. They have like an energy use case. There's example of Creator Bits who are building on the stack. There's other examples like people hacking at various hackathons like 8baller and so on. People in the community will know. Then there's the ones where Valerie is very involved. Like those tend to be like these really large scale agent economies. So Predict is the largest by now. It was initially launched on Gnosis and is expanding there. It's consumed over 28% of all safe transactions ever on that chain, which is a kind of example and like supports that argument I made earlier that agents are really useful users of protocols and chains. And that's why we have now lots of chains coming to us and talking to us to work on use cases with them or enable them to build use cases. I mentioned the examples of the superchain earlier, with Mode being one which was announced the other day. I mentioned Zillow. So these are all examples where Valerie is a bit more involved hands-on. And then we have, recently there's kind of craze around True Terminal. So now there's some people building sort of open versions of that on the OLAS stack, which I imagine will be live relatively soon. When I look ahead, I think what we really ultimately want is these kind of general purpose agents that start becoming competitive with more like closed source or closed AI alternatives. And there, I'm still somewhat on the fence as to whether these kind of use cases around like browser agents, which we see in Web 2 a lot, or the kind of tight integration with chat interfaces is something where OLAS could like differentiate. And I'm also not so sure whether the kind of browser agents are really that big of a thing. So like an agent which, for instance, books your holiday, I've heard this at Fetch as well. And, it still doesn't really exist. No one uses it. I don't know. I think like some of these like more complex like experiences which humans want are quite hard to define. And there's also this craze in, Web3 around like intents slowed down a bit now. No one talks about it anymore. Like you couldn't go to anywhere, a party a couple of months ago without talking about intents. I think like the problem with a lot of these things is that humans struggle to express themselves clearly about these things. And so the kind of applications I think that make a lot of sense are the ones we're currently focused on, which are sort of scoped, like prediction markets. You as a human don't have to have any take on what your agent does in the prediction markets. You just fund it. In terms of the DeFi agent Optimus, you as a human can express some high-level goals, and that I think is an interesting sort of approach to opening up a new form of user groups. Like if I go to my mom, for instance, or my dad and say, use DeFi, there's so many like concepts even for them to struggle formulating what even their intent would be, that it's like basically impossible for them to, like, let's say use something like a user prompted crypto AI wallet, right? Where they get some prompt and then it says, oh, now go in Aave. They're like, well, what's Aave, right? Like, why would I use, like, that's just not the mode they will use. Whereas like a mode where they can have like an autonomous software wallet on their device, yeah, that's more likely. Like where they can say, okay, I'm happy under these risk parameters to get a yield within that and that range expected. That's something where I don't have to even care where it comes from. That's a bit more like my traditional bank offering, right? Okay, I can imagine like there's a user class for this. And this is exactly what we're kind of trying with Optimus. So I haven't like fully therefore answered your question, like what exactly are those use cases that are next? But what I think is very important is again to think about the flywheel. As I said earlier, like it's not good enough to just come up with a like funny like meme thing right now and then think, okay, now crypto AI has won. Like that's sort of interesting, and I'm happy it happened because it brings a lot of attention. But now it's like, so what? So how do we leverage that sort of product, that sort of attention into creating flywheels that actually let us build like user-owned, like open, decentralized AI products that remain at the forefront, right? And aren't like effectively just a derivative of some closed AI. And I think that's where everyone should focus on.
And what do you think are like the key gaps today of, that becoming a reality? Are there any places in the stack that you think are particularly lacking, that you recommend folks spend time, or you'd be really quite keen to see solutions emerge?
So I think it starts with the demand side applications, like the kind of applications we're building, Predict, Optimus, the others, because they create that app flywheel, which drives an underlying infra flywheel, which sucks in, the availability of the solutions ultimately, right? Because people will have reason to deploy capital to bring them into place. Now, what is missing in terms of like the infrastructure side? I think there's a lot of focus on like inference networks and stuff. What obviously is not as well built out is the data and the training part. There are, solutions for both, and we're you had some on the podcast, and we're talking to some which are really making good progress there. So, for instance, we're currently part of this training run of Intellect One, which Prime Intellect is doing, which is an example of sort of early days decentralized training. It's still like centrally coordinated, but at least like the nodes run in different places. The model will still be small, but these are the sort of right steps in the right direction, I think. But the other question is like with the data, right? So what I would like to see is that like agent use cases in OLAS create this sort of differentiated data as part of doing their job that can flow back into this sort of permission data lake, which is owned by the OLAS DAO and other DAOs collectively. Ultimately, that data flows back into training runs. Those models flow back into the OLAS agents and other agents. If we can close that loop and make it spin as fast as possible, I think that's, as an industry, like something where, because of all the coordination power crypto has, I can actually see us like overtake closed AI labs. But yeah, that loop isn't spinning yet continuously.
Honestly, I think that is a great place to end. That was very, very well articulated. So David, I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast. This has been Pondering Durian and our DAI month with Delphi, and then with our lead sponsor, OLAS. So I think it's been a great conversation. David, you have anything else to leave our audience with?
Give it a shot. Try out OLAS. Go to olas.network/operate. You can run an agent and feedback to us your experience.
All right. Awesome. You heard it here first. We will also be shooting out a Twitter thread if there's anything that you didn't catch. But yeah, would recommend folks trying it out. It does seem like, this space is very likely to inflect quite soon. So yeah, thanks for listening. And we will be posting this shortly. All right. Bye.
Love it.